In the 10th year after my death, there was another woman by Samuel's side. He treated her as my substitute, calling my name as he looked at her. Holly, Holly. Every single call reached my ears. Yet I could only drift in midair, watching them. Chapter 1. When I was young, something happened to my family, and I had no choice but to be fostered by the Martinez family. Samuel Martinez's parents were old acquaintances of my parents. They treated me as their own and were extremely kind to me. The Brown family lived next door to the Martinez family. So Samuel Martinez, Andrew Brown, and I grew up together. We played together from childhood and could be considered childhood sweethearts. Samuel had a very good temper and was gentle with everyone. Andrew, on the other hand, was more or less his opposite, aloof, sharp-tongued, and proudly arrogant. As for me, in Andrew's words, I was slow and soft, like a lump of dough that anyone could knead as they pleased. When he said that, he would usually rub my head, deliberately messing up my hair in an infuriating way. Because he was taller and stronger, I couldn't do anything about it. All I could do was glare at him, only to hear Samuel say with a smile, "Don't think Holly is easy to bully. If she really gets angry, I don't think you'd be able to handle it." That wasn't an empty statement. When I had just transferred schools, some small-time thugs near the campus would often come to extort money from me. At the time, I was only 12 years old and had just arrived at the Martinez household. The unfamiliar environment left me at a loss. So the first few times, I timidly handed the money over. Having gotten a taste of success, they grew bolder. One day, they blocked me at the entrance of an alley, and someone's hand reached toward my waist. In that instant, every hair on my body stood on end. I swung my school bag with all my strength and smashed it at them. Again and again. Teenage thugs of 15 or 16 weren't going to be scared off by a school bag. As expected, I was kicked to the ground. Someone spat and cursed. You don't know when you're being given a chance. Fists and feet came down together. The pain made me feel the brutal reality of life in that moment. Through the haze, I heard Samuel's voice, "Teacher, it's over here." Someone rushed over and punched the thug who was lagging behind. Later, I learned that it was Andrew, the boy who was always seen walking with Samuel. Andrew said that I had looked like a cat with its fur standing on end that day, highly aggressive, but also stupid to the extreme. Samuel nudged him, signaling him to shut up. Aunt Martinez sat by my bed and gently comforted me. "You were already very brave, but if something like this happens again, remember to tell us and the teachers, okay?" She was still so gentle, just like the day she brought me home. Her eyes soft and tinged with pity. "Holly, would you like to live at Auntie's house from now on?" That day, I didn't respond to her at all. This time, I quietly loosened my grip on the wrinkled bedsheet and nodded. From then on, I went to school and came home together with Samuel and the others. It was much later that I learned that after that incident, both Samuel and Andrew had been lectured by Aunt Martinez, mostly scolding them for failing to protect me properly. After that, Samuel would sometimes talk in his sleep, tears at the corners of his eyes. "Holly, it's all because I didn't protect you." I would lie beside the bed and look at his sleeping face. Even knowing he couldn't hear me, I would still unconsciously reply, "It really isn't your fault." But that was all much later. A very, very long time later. During those years, under Samuel's and Andrew's protection, I grew freely and wildly. My life could even be called unrestrained and happily carefree. On the night the college entrance exam ended, Samuel gathered his courage with alcohol and confessed to me. We got together. After that, we went to the same university in the South. Andrew, true to his habit of never following the beaten path, chose a university in the North. During our 4 years in college, the three of us would always get together during holidays. Andrew would constantly complain that he didn't want to be a third wheel, nor did he want to be force-fed displays of affection. Samuel would joke back, saying that once Andrew found himself a girlfriend, he wouldn't have to suffer like this anymore. Andrew would casually snap back, "Dating? Even dogs don't do that." When he said this, his handsome brows would knit slightly, revealing a hint of impatience. Samuel knew when to stop and would smoothly change the topic. But in this world, meetings and partings are ultimately commonplace. Because of studies, work, and other reasons, we met Andrew less and less. and there were fewer and fewer things we could talk about. Our last reunion had been nearly a year apart, and the timing couldn't have been worse. It was the very day I died in a car accident. I didn't see what happened that day with my own eyes. I only heard later that Andrew and Samuel had gotten into a fight, leaving both of them injured. I couldn't understand why they fought. It clearly wasn't their fault. After being taken to the police station, they turned on the drunk driver and beat him up again. In the end, they were both severely lectured by the police before reluctantly stopping. The moment they walked out of the station, I woke up, floating in midair. I excitedly rushed toward them, wanting to hug them only to pass straight through their bodies. I couldn't touch them. They couldn't touch me either. They couldn't see me, hear me, or sense me. Holly was dead. She died at 25, in a summer that had once been full of hope. Chapter 2. To be honest, I never cared that much about life and death. Before I came to the Martinez family, death was a frequent visitor in my life. Parents, relatives, one after another, as if they were lining up. It was only after arriving at the Martinez household that I learned life had another side, one filled with hope, vitality, and joy. Those 10+ years of happiness were already more than precious enough for me. Besides, when the car hit me, death came swiftly. I barely felt any pain. So when Samuel stroked my photo and murmured to himself, asking whether it hurt, I jumped anxiously at his side. I didn't hurt at all. Please don't be this sad anymore. I knew my death would make him grieve. But 10 years had passed. Night after night, he couldn't sleep, and his personality grew increasingly withdrawn. My initial wish of "I hope he never forgets me" slowly turned into "I hope he can forget me as soon as possible." That was why, when Virginia appeared, my feelings were complicated. She resembled me by 70 or 80%. When she smiled, she looked almost exactly like I did at 25. At that moment, Samuel's gaze went blank, as if his entire being had been hollowed out. The usually cold and unyielding CEO of Martinez Group actually lost his composure at the negotiation table, something rarely seen. The boss of the partner company, sitting across from him, gave an ambiguous smile, quietly basking in his own cleverness. It wasn't as if no one had ever tried to push women into Samuel's arms before. All kinds, all styles, every single one rejected. This boss clearly had connections. He managed to dig up information about Samuel's first love, me, and find Virginia among the sea of people. Samuel kept her by his side and frankly told her that she was my substitute. Virginia wasn't surprised at all. She put on the smile that looked most like mine, lightly twirled the contract with her fingertips, and said, "Since I'm standing in for someone the Martinez CEO can never forget, his dearest, his most beloved, shouldn't the price be higher?" That smile stabbed at him. He quickly withdrew the nostalgia from his expression, pressed his lips together, and said coldly, "Ask for whatever you want, but don't wear that face and talk to me in that tone again." Virginia shrugged, wrote down a string of numbers, and smiled. "Pleasure doing business." Just as Samuel's brows began to knit, she put on an innocent smile again. "I promise, last time." That short sentence sounded so much like me. Even though Samuel hid it well, I still caught the brief moment when he lost focus. One summer during middle school, I once again got diarrhea from overeating iced watermelon. Lying weakly in bed, I looked at Samuel, who was frowning, just like that, holding up one finger. "I promise, last time. I won't eat that much next time." Of course, the next time, I would still fight Andrew for iced watermelon, leaving Samuel completely helpless. In the end, Aunt Martinez directly restricted how often and how much watermelon could be bought at home. My health was simply too poor. If it hadn't been controlled, something serious would have happened. Later, when Samuel and I lived together, he still kept me on a tight leash. This was too cold. That was too spicy. This wasn't allowed. That wasn't allowed either. I protested unhappily. "Then what can I eat? Only the food you make?" Samuel raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean? Are you tired of it?" I glanced at his eyes and deliberately muttered, "To be honest, just a tiny bit." Rarely domineering, he kissed me forcefully. When he finally pulled back, he spoke near my ear through clenched teeth. "You're not allowed to get tired of me." How could anyone not get tired of a man? Virginia was much clearer-headed than I ever was. While talking to her best friend on the phone, she said casually, It's just that what's lost always seems the best, a matter of obsession over gains and losses. Anyway, I'm making money, so I'm not losing out. For some reason, I could only move around inside Samuel's house, or near Samuel himself. I couldn't go anywhere else. Today, after seeing Virginia, I didn't want to follow Samuel, so I stayed home to observe my so-called substitute. She sat on the sofa, talking on the phone while slowly picking off her bright red toenail polish. Bit by bit, it was oddly interesting. After she finished, she lay down and scrolled through her phone, muttering, "I'm buying some white dresses right now. Come to think of it, that girl was pretty pitiful too. I saw some of her information." Sigh. I wasn't interested in listening anymore and focused on watching her shop. The dresses she added to the cart were all styles from over 10 years ago. Back then, I probably would have liked them quite a lot. But now that I'd lingered in the human world for another 10 years, I honestly found them rather unappealing. Virginia, however, was very satisfied. She decisively placed the order. Mission accomplished. Next, should I make him a meal? Her friend exclaimed dramatically. Girl, are you being a substitute or a live-in nanny? You don't get it. This is professional ethics for a substitute. Virginia replied. I'm getting paid to do a job, and honestly, making this much money just by relying on my face, it does make my conscience a little uneasy. I stood there listening, stunned, and unconsciously nodded along. That actually made sense. But I looked at Virginia bustling about in the kitchen and murmured quietly. I was always a complete disaster in the kitchen. You know. Chapter 3. I was a complete disaster in the kitchen. Virginia wasn't. She was even an excellent cook, simple home-style dishes that looked good, smelled good, and tasted good. If I weren't a ghost, I definitely would have sneaked a few bites first. Samuel, however, was completely unappreciative. When he saw the table full of food, his expression stiffened slightly. You don't need to do this. You don't need to do this meant, you shouldn't do this, because the original wouldn't. Virginia received the message perfectly. Her expression remained gentle. Then are you eating or not? If not, I'll eat it myself. Samuel refused. He made himself a simple meal and then watched, with a complicated expression, as Virginia across from him ate with great enjoyment. I bet he smelled the food and regretted it a little, but the current him was far too stubborn to ever back down. Sure enough, throughout the meal, his expression remained grim. Every now and then, he would glance at Virginia's face, fall into a brief daze for a few seconds, and then return to looking displeased. It was utterly baffling. The Samuel from before was nothing like this. He had always been the most good-tempered among the three of us. The summer after our 3rd year of middle school, it was Samuel's birthday. Aunt Martinez and the others happened to be away, so I decided to personally cook him a bowl of long-life noodles. Andrew was incredibly annoying. Not only did he refuse to help, he hovered around me the entire time, mocking me. Is it really necessary to make such a big deal out of it? You're overreacting. I don't see you being this serious on my birthday. I fumbled clumsily with the ingredients, multitasking just to deal with this young master. Don't I give you birthday presents every year? Those things count as presents? Andrew's parents were always busy and rarely paid attention to him, which led to his terrible personality and sharp tongue. But I knew he was all talk. I bared my teeth at him. I saved my allowance bit by bit to buy those. If you don't like them, give them all back to me. Don't even think about it, he blurted out instinctively, then added awkwardly. I already threw them into some corner and can't find them. I stared at the pot of broth bubbling away and nodded thoughtfully. Then I won't give you presents anymore. Holly! Just as Andrew was about to explode, Samuel arrived at the perfect moment. He shot Andrew a sharp look before turning to me with gentle eyes. It really isn't necessary to go through all this trouble. I smiled. No, I want to do it. Andrew looked us up and down disdainfully and scoffed. TCH. Then he earned himself another gentle yet warning look from Samuel. Still, they let me mess around however I pleased. The result was a bowl of noodles that looked like an unidentifiable lump of dough. The kitchen didn't escape either. It was a complete disaster zone. Like the aftermath of a catastrophe. Samuel didn't get angry. He patted my dejected head and smiled. It's okay. I've already received your gift. I'll cook instead. Watching his busy back, I could only sigh softly. Samuel is really amazing. He was only half a year older than me. Fine. He was good at studying, but why was he good at cooking too? Andrew remained unimpressed. This counts as amazing? It's just cooking. But you can't even do that. And I remember you never beat him in exams either. His face darkened instantly. What do you mean never? We're evenly matched. Okay? Stop reading romance novels. Someone who's always number one isn't realistic. That part was true. Both he and Samuel had excellent grades, consistently ranking in the top 20 of the year. But who ranked higher was never predictable. To put it plainly, the two of them had always been quietly competing, and in the process, other competitors would occasionally enter the race as well. Back then, there was talk of winning and losing, but once everyone went their separate ways, who won and who lost became impossible to define. After graduation, Samuel started his own business and worked his way to where he was now. Andrew studied medicine and wore a white coat in a top-tier hospital, and I, who had once chased after them with all my strength, had become a free and unburdened ghost. From another perspective, did that mean I'd finally gotten ahead of them? I pondered this for a long time, amused by my own thought, and drifted over to take a look at Samuel's bedroom. It was already very late. Samuel, who usually suffered from insomnia at this hour, was sleeping deeply tonight. Virginia lay beside him, also fast asleep. There was a small distance between them, yet their breaths were subtly intertwined. Something was about to change, I thought. Chapter 4. I never once doubted Samuel's love for me, even when we were young. He was the most mature among the three of us. He was always gentle and considerate in how he treated people, yet I could still feel that the way he treated me was different. The same smile, but when he looked at me, there was always a little more sincerity in his eyes. The same words, but when he spoke to me, his tone would always soften just a bit. At first, I thought he only saw me as a younger sister. The earliest moment I realized otherwise was in my second year of high school. A boy who sat behind me wrote me a love letter and slipped it into my backpack when I wasn't paying attention. Later, when I got home and did homework together with Samuel and Andrew, I casually took it out, completely confused. Huh? What's this? Andrew's brain worked lightning fast at moments like this. Don't tell me some guy wrote you a love letter? I didn't believe it. I opened it and skimmed through it quickly, then saw the name signed at the bottom. My face instantly flushed red. It really was a love letter, and it was from that usually dull-looking boy who sat behind me. Seriously? Andrew's pitch shot up. He snatched the letter away and spoke in an exaggerated, mocking tone. Oh my God, Holly, you're daring to have an early romance. I'm not. My face burned. I didn't even know how that letter got in my bag. Let me see. Samuel, who had been quietly doing his homework, finally looked up. His attitude was gentle, but his hand brooked no refusal as he took the paper, and seemingly without meaning to, crumpled it slightly. Samuel had always been the one who felt most like a parent among the three of us. I really don't have that kind of intention, I hurried to explain. I just ask him questions a lot, so we're closer than others. He probably misunderstood. Andrew scoffed, not even clear on who he was insulting, not focusing on studying and thinking about this stuff all day. Samuel's expression was calm. He placed the crumpled letter on the desk and smiled at me. I believe you. Holly, you'll handle this properly on your own, right? The heat on my face gradually faded. I pressed my lips together and nodded. Yeah, I'll explain it to him when I get back. Right now, I just want to focus on studying. That part was true. Ever since living with the Martinez family, I had always felt a bit indebted. All I wanted was to study hard, get into a good university, find a good job, and repay them properly. Then stop asking him questions too, Andrew said irritably, spinning his pen until it clattered onto the desk. Samuel and I are both top 20 in our grade. Who else do you need to ask? But your classroom is so far from ours, I protested reluctantly. And during breaks, I can just turn my head and ask him. It's so convenient. Seeing Andrew's expression darken further, I swallowed the rest of my words. When we chose academic tracks in our first year of high school, Samuel and Andrew picked science and ended up in the same class on the 4th floor of the teaching building. I chose liberal arts and was placed on the 1st floor. If you asked me to climb 4 floors just to ask a math question, I'd rather die. Besides, we only went home once a week and rarely ran into each other at school. It really wasn't a good opportunity for questions. I knew what Andrew was upset about. It was nothing more than my refusal to choose science with him back then, but I truly wanted nothing to do with physics, chemistry, or biology. Samuel stepped in to smooth things over, smiling gently. It's fine, Holly has her own ideas. Still, I couldn't help feeling that Samuel's mood wasn't great either. That night, as usual, he came to my room and brought me a glass of milk. After I took it, he leaned against the doorframe, his brows lowered, and softly called my name, Holly. I didn't understand and looked up at him. He was silent for a moment, then raised his hand and gently rubbed my hair. From now on, I'll walk you back to the dorm after evening self-study. I can also help you with your questions. I instinctively tried to refuse. Wouldn't that be too much trouble for you? It won't. He paused, just as considerate as ever. It's on the way anyway, and the school's been having issues with stray dogs lately. Didn't you say a few days ago that you were scared? With that, the matter was settled. From that day on, every night after evening self-study ended, Samuel would pack up his things immediately and come downstairs to wait outside my classroom. He would first hand me a bottle of milk, then explain a few problems to me, and finally walk me back to the dorm. Occasionally, classmates would joke and ask whether we were dating. I'd blush slightly and clear things up, saying that Samuel and I were just comrades in an academic mutual aid alliance. After all, on the walk back to the dorm every night, the only thing we ever talked about really was studying. My high school math grades survived solely thanks to Samuel's nightly one-on-one tutoring. It wasn't that I never had other thoughts. Sometimes I would stare absent-mindedly at Samuel's profile under the moonlight, only to forcefully suppress those wandering thoughts with studying comes first. Early romance, skipping class, fighting, those kinds of youthful romance novel cliches never appeared in my academic life. Samuel and Andrew were both good-looking, but neither carried titles like school heartthrob or campus tyrant. There were plenty of standout figures at school, but the most coveted identity was always the same, top student. Those days were filled with oceans of white exam papers, textbooks and notebooks flipped through again and again, and the old ceiling fan above our heads that we constantly worried might fall down, squeaking as it turned. Andrew would still roughhouse with me during holidays, and Samuel would always stand by, watching with a gentle smile, then quietly walk beside me along campus paths, accompanying me through countless nights lit by rows of streetlights. Chapter 5. The night the teacher's appreciation banquet ended, I laughed and chatted as I said goodbye to my classmates. When I looked up, I saw Samuel waiting at the hotel entrance, just like the countless times before. The boy who waited for me outside the classroom after evening self-study. I told you there was no need to come pick me up, I complained, though my steps still bounced as I skipped over to him. He had grown so much taller, nearly a full head above me now. Hearing that, he lowered his gaze to look at me. I'm worried about you. He was always like this, like an overprotective mom, even more afraid of me getting hurt than Aunt Martinez. I leaned closer and caught a faint scent of alcohol. You drank? Yeah. Samuel habitually rubbed my head. Andrew insisted on drinking, so I had a little too. Just turned 18 and look how smug he is, I muttered as we walked home together, watching our shadows stretch longer and longer on the ground. Samuel laughed softly, light as a feather. And what about Holly? He stopped walking and stepped a little closer, making the two shadows on the ground intertwine. My Holly is an adult now too. Want to try drinking? For someone as rule-abiding as Samuel to ask me if I wanted alcohol was truly rare. So the same me who had declined drink after drink at the banquet agreed without a second thought. But that first sip of alcohol in my life was really harsh. I scrunched up my whole face as I swallowed it, feeling as though the can in my hand had turned scalding hot. The sharp bitterness spread through my mouth, and I shoved the beer can toward Samuel in disgust. It's gross. I don't want it anymore. He took it naturally and casually pressed the cold can against my cheek. So you're not allowed to drink in the future. Remember that, okay? So that was the real goal all along. Hadn't I just mentioned wanting to try it not long ago? All right, I remember, I said, dodging the can and waving my hand impatiently. I walked a few steps forward, only to realize Samuel hadn't followed. When I turned around, he was still standing there, one hand holding the beer can, the other hanging at his side, backlit by the light. I couldn't see his expression clearly, Something felt off about him after drinking, starting with the fact that pressing the can to my face wasn't his usual style at all. "Samuel?" I called out softly, then I heard his slightly hoarse voice, carried by the summer night breeze straight into my heart. "Holly, I like you." My first kiss happened just like that, mixed with a faint taste of alcohol, under a sky full of stars on a summer night. After we got together, Samuel turned into the ultimate model boyfriend. My college roommates practically sighed every day. How can someone have such a considerate boyfriend? That suffering didn't last long. In my sophomore year, Samuel rescued me and rented a place outside with me. The reason was simply that I found the cafeteria food unbearable and kept eating takeout. Too oily, too salty, ingredients not fresh. Samuel criticized the takeout in my hands like a picky food critic, dismissing it as utterly worthless. After the 800th time I complained to him about how inedible the cafeteria food was, and after I'd gotten diarrhea not long ago from eating there, he finally frowned and made a decision. "Then I'll cook for you from now on." And just like that, I somehow ended up living with him. Once we lived together, Samuel's protectiveness became almost pathological. As long as he was home, I basically turned into a completely helpless waste of a person. He was afraid I'd get tired no matter what I did. Afraid I wouldn't tolerate whatever I ate. The sentence he said most often was, "You've always been in poor health." I'll do it. Chapter 6. Because of this, I began to think that Virginia could change Samuel, or rather, that she could save him. That feeling came to me the very first moment I saw Virginia. After observing the way she and Samuel interacted for a while, I became even more certain of it. For the first 3 months, Samuel's attitude toward Virginia was always restrained and distant. He cooked for her, bought her clothes, and held her while they slept, like a considerate boyfriend. But beyond that, there was no real intimacy between them. Virginia adapted to this perfectly. When Samuel was around, she was obedient and well-behaved, like a gentle little rabbit. When he wasn't, she found other ways to pass the time, reading, gaming, going out with her girlfriends, and on a certain day each month, she would look at her account balance and smile brightly. In short, her life was colorful and vibrant, as if she had endless energy. The turning point came on a special day, our relationship anniversary. Samuel came home drunk, reeking of alcohol. Virginia stepped forward to catch him, patiently wiping his face and feeding him hangover soup. With his eyes half closed, Samuel suddenly grabbed Virginia's wrist and let out a hoarse, trembling call. "Holly?" I floated in the corner of the living room and answered softly, "Yeah." No one could hear me. Virginia lowered her gaze and said nothing. After finishing the soup, she let Samuel rest on the sofa. But Samuel didn't let go. He gripped Virginia's wrist tightly and pulled her closer to him, inch by inch. "Holly, why aren't you answering me? Are you angry?" His tone softened, and his usually cold features were now full of tenderness. "I came back late. That's my fault. Holly, don't be mad." Gentle brows and eyes, words tinged with careful coaxing, how much he looked like the Samuel from 10 years ago. And yet, when I saw him kiss Virginia, I suddenly felt that the vast living room had become unbearably cramped, leaving me unable to breathe. I drifted into the bathroom and stayed there all night, trying to reason with myself. "Holly, you're already dead. Samuel should start a new life." But if he was starting a new life, why was he calling my name? "Holly, he just hasn't let go of you yet. Eventually, he will." Yes, that was how it should be. But doesn't this look like one of those substitute romance stories you've read? It's exactly like one. But he'll let you go and fall in love with Virginia. The process may be bumpy, but the ending will be happy. But what about me? He was moving forward. Why was I still here? I was already dead. Why did I still have to be here, witnessing all of this? I should leave. The next day, Virginia came out of Samuel's bedroom. Her loose nightgown couldn't hide the dark and light marks all over her body. "Holly, you should leave this place." That sentence looped endlessly in my mind, but I couldn't leave this house at all. I tried every corner. It was as if an invisible barrier blocked my movement wherever I went. All I could do was watch Samuel and Virginia grow closer and closer. Listen as Samuel called my name over and over again. "Holly, Holly." Sometimes, when Virginia looked at Samuel, her eyes were full of sympathy. But every now and then, I didn't miss the affection flashing through them. Samuel began taking Virginia to public events. I didn't follow them, but I still knew about it. I truly felt like a vengeful ghost. When they were at home, I would hide in the bathroom or the storage room even though they couldn't see me at all. Before I knew it, winter was almost here. I spent more and more time in the storage room, growing numb, until one day, I heard an angry roar from outside. "Samuel, you disgust me." That voice was all too familiar. Without thinking, I drifted into the living room, and there I saw Andrew, his eyes bloodshot. And as if he sensed something, he looked straight in my direction. His whole body froze. Ho! Holly? Chapter 7. Samuel had always kept my existence well hidden. Very few people knew he had once had a lover who died young. Later, when he began bringing Virginia to various public occasions, others would only comment on what a perfect match they were. A union made in heaven. Andrew hadn't been in contact with Samuel for several years, but news like the long-single CEO of the Martinez family finally finding love was bound to reach his ears. So he came knocking and saw Virginia, who looked so much like me. I'll never forget the scene I witnessed when I came out. Andrew stood in the entryway wearing a black overcoat, snowflakes still clinging to his shoulders. His brows and eyes were filled with barely contained fury, like a bomb ready to explode. Samuel stood nearby, bent slightly at the waist, one hand braced against the wall, the other covering a bleeding corner of his mouth. Virginia stood close beside him, still looking a little stunned. I was stunned too, especially when I met Andrew's reddened eyes. Ho! Holly? Realizing he wasn't talking to Virginia, I pointed at myself in disbelief. You can see me? In the next instant, Andrew's pupils visibly shook. He could see me. Finally, someone could see me. For a moment, I didn't know how to react. I just stared back at him, dumbfounded. Samuel straightened, his voice hoarse. Andrew, this. Shut up! Andrew roared. His eyes, usually so expressive, never left me for even a second. Samuel and Virginia both looked uneasy. In the end, I drifted over, slowly approaching Andrew. Andrew, don't be angry first. Back when he used to lose his temper like this, I would speak to him in the same low, placating voice. Unfortunately, it didn't work this time. Andrew swayed as if struck by something devastating. His face went deathly pale. After staring at me for a few more seconds, he suddenly turned and fled, escaping in a panic. I wondered if I'd scared him. Without thinking, I followed, only then realizing that, at long last, I was able to leave the house. I drifted after him into his car. When I lightly settled into the passenger seat, he had his head buried against the steering wheel, breathing hard, his whole body trembling. I'd never seen him this shaken before. I couldn't help muttering, "Am I really that scary?" His body jolted again. He lifted his head to look at me, eyes still red, lips pale. "Holly?" Trying to ease the mood, I smiled. "It's been so long, don't you recognize me anymore?" He didn't answer. He blinked hard a few times, his reddened eyes glistening, then reached out with a trembling hand to touch me, only for it to pass straight through my cheek. Still, he kept staring at me, unmoving, with a gaze full of longing, greed, and nostalgia. After a long while, he let out a bitter laugh. "Am I crazy?" I clicked my tongue. "Then just assume you are." For a doctor who believed deeply in science, not being able to accept the supernatural was only natural. But Andrew remained frozen, looking at me, rubbing his face twice, then looking at me again, before suddenly breaking into a foolish grin. The smile was so wide it made even me, a ghost, a little uneasy. In the end, I tentatively reached out and tapped his forehead in midair. "Haven't seen you in years, did you really get stupid?" Andrew didn't move. His head even leaned slightly closer to my transparent hand. His hoarse voice still carried a hint of laughter. "Even if I'm stupid, I'm not stupider than you." That was something he used to say all the time to mock me. This time, though, I didn't feel like arguing. I just smiled lightly. "Well, can't be helped." Andrew accepted the fact that I'd become a ghost remarkably quickly, and once I realized I could finally escape Samuel's orbit, I immediately hitchhiked along with Andrew to his place. Then I discovered that I couldn't stray too far from Andrew either. At a distance of 3 or 4 meters from him, I ran straight into that invisible barrier again. Turning back, I saw Andrew leaning against the car, one eyebrow raised high as he looked at me. Do you have anyone else at home? I knocked lightly against the barrier, a bit disappointed, and drifted back toward him. His tone was casual, but his gaze never left me, even if I did. Could you run, float, away? That might have been true, but I'd escaped Samuel precisely because I didn't want to witness him living a life with someone else. And Andrew could see me, if there were other people living with him. That would be unbearably awkward. I frowned in thought, only to hear him chuckle softly. I live alone. Come on. His place was neither big nor small, perfect for one person. The decor was simple, almost ascetic, to the point that I couldn't help voicing a guess. Andrew, you haven't been single all these years, have you? He'd almost completely fallen out with Samuel. Doing the math, I hadn't heard any news about him for 10 years. He gave the same old answer. Dating? Even dogs don't do that. Hearing that, I shifted my gaze from the furniture to him. He'd already taken off his coat, wearing a fitted brown sweater, lounging lazily against the sofa. Every movement radiated the charm of a mature man. 10 years had sharpened his features, but the slight upward tilt at the corners of his eyes still lent his face a touch of flirtatiousness. Noticing me staring, he grew uncharacteristically uncomfortable and pressed his lips together. Why are you staring at me? Aren't you staring at me too? I was a little overexcited from finally being able to talk to someone and shot back, hands on my hips. What? Do I still look youthful and radiant? After all, I'd remained frozen at 25. Andrew, on the other hand, was 35 now, a proper middle-aged man. Full of yourself. He laughed, finally reining in some of the hunger in his gaze. So, care to explain your situation now? I floated up into the air and spun in a circle. As you can see, I'm dead, but not completely. I was forced to stay by Samuel's side for 10 years. Now I've finally escaped, only to find I can't leave you. I wasn't sure which part pleased Andrew, but the corner of his lips actually curled upward. Annoyed, I threw him a punch through thin air. You're this happy that I died? His smile vanished instantly. He lifted his head slightly and looked at me calmly, speaking each word clearly. I'm not happy, Holly. I'm devastated. Chapter 8. The relatively lighthearted mood came to an abrupt halt. Seeing that heavy, oppressive emotions were about to surge back, I drifted over and made a meaningless gesture of patting his head. It's okay, little Andrew. Everything's in the past now. Life has to go on. Andrew was a few months younger than me, so whenever I wanted to tease him, I'd call him little kid. Sure enough, his brows knit slightly. I pressed my advantage and added fuel to the fire. Hee hee. Now it's finally my turn to pat your head. The low-pressure gloom slowly dissipated. He looked at me like I was an idiot. Do you think you can even touch me now? What's that supposed to mean, discriminating against ghosts? The Ghost Protection Association strongly condemns this. After some pointless, imaginary roughhousing, the corner of Andrew's mouth finally lifted slightly. Just then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of the red string on his left wrist. Curious, I floated closer. Huh? You still kept this? That red string was something I'd gotten from a temple. Back then, the college entrance exam was approaching. I dragged Samuel and Andrew up a mountain together, climbed all the way to a temple halfway up, and spent 15 yuan to buy 3 red strings. Andrew called it an IQ tax and was extremely resistant to wearing it. Superstitious nonsense. You're the only one who believes this stuff, he'd said, full of disdain. I forcibly shoved the string into his hand, then gave one to Samuel as well. Better to believe it exists than not. Besides, I paid for it. Samuel took it and asked thoughtfully, Holly, do you have a university in mind? I thought for a moment and shook my head. I'll see how well I do. I'm not forcing anything. And the master said this string doesn't just bless exams, you can make other wishes too. Then I turned to Andrew. You're not allowed to throw it away. If I find out you did, you owe me 5 yuan. Andrew was so speechless he forgot to throw the string away. What the hell, Holly? Are you robbing me? Thinking about it now, I shot a sidelong glance at a certain someone. You didn't keep this thing for all these years just because you couldn't bear to lose 5 yuan, did you? None of your business. He looked away, pulled his sleeve down to cover the string. I just forgot to throw it away. Oh, I deliberately dragged out the sound, not planning to let him off. Then did you make a wish back then? He gave me a disdainful glance. Of course not. I got into a university on my own merit. All right. You're amazing, I said perfunctorily. My body started drifting around as I openly inspected the home of this lifelong bachelor. Andrew tacitly allowed it, following closely behind me step by step, as if afraid I'd run, float, away. When I was blatantly peeping into his bedroom, he finally spoke up, but what he asked was, "Did you make a wish back then?" I was busy lamenting how boring his cold-toned bedsheets were. Hearing him, I turned around. What? He pressed his lips together. That red string. What did you wish for? To get into the same university as Samuel? Why would you think that? I was momentarily stunned, then waved my hand. I really just performed exceptionally well to get into Z University. As for my wish, I paused, then smiled. You can laugh if you want, but all I wished for was that everyone would be okay. My memories from before I came to the Martinez family were a bit blurry. I only vaguely remembered being unhappy. So later on, all I wanted was for the people around me to be okay. Looking at it now, aside from my little accident, everyone really did turn out fine. How should I put it? It was kind of effective. Andrew didn't say anything more. He wasn't very talkative to begin with. He just liked arguing with me. Now that he'd probably matured, he couldn't even be bothered to bicker anymore. He simply listened to me ramble through 10 years worth of pent-up chatter while doing his own things, a faint smile lingering at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't until he was about to shower that he reminded me before closing the door. You're not allowed to sneak in and peek. To be fair, I hadn't even had that thought. Hearing this, though, made me rebellious. What's that supposed to mean? You're making me sound like some kind of pervert. Besides, it's not like I've never seen it before. His movements froze. His expression instantly darkened. That's exactly why I'm warning you. If you dare sneak a look, I'll find a master tomorrow to exorcise you. I was shocked. You're truly vicious. Andrew snorted and shut the door directly. What a cold, heartless man. Thinking back, the last time I saw Andrew Brown's abs was the last time. It was one day during a high school summer vacation. Aunt Martinez had asked me to deliver something to the Brown family. The door wasn't fully closed, so like always, I pushed it open and walked right in, only to see Andrew in the living room, shirtless, towel in hand, drying his hair. Those beautiful, I didn't know whether they were 6-pack or 8-pack, abs were instantly covered by the white towel. Andrew's face turned bright red, as if he were about to die of embarrassment. What the hell? Holly, don't you knock before coming in? My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. I immediately turned around. Andrew, are you sick? Why aren't you wearing clothes in broad daylight? After a rustling sound, he snapped back angrily. I just took a shower. Why would I be wearing clothes? You still have to put on clothes after a shower. Do you just run around naked all the time after bathing? Samuel's a guy too, and he always gets dressed properly after a shower. I'd choked him speechless. Holly, this is my house. You're the one who didn't knock. I shamelessly retorted. Your door wasn't locked. What was I supposed to knock for? I never knocked before either. You're twisting logic, and you're just being unreasonable. The two of us argued like that for quite a while, until Samuel came looking for us. Holly, why are you standing at the door this whole time? I snapped back irritably. I'm waiting for Andrew to get dressed. Why is he taking so long? Samuel raised an eyebrow. Get dressed? Well, I walked in just now and saw him not wearing. Shut up. Andrew appeared out of nowhere, glaring at me viciously. He snatched the items from my hands and then bang, slammed the door shut, locking Samuel and me outside. The entire sequence was smooth and seamless, done in one clean motion. I kicked the door. What a rotten temper. Samuel looked at the door and said lightly, his ears are really red. I didn't hear him clearly and tilted my head. What? Samuel smiled at me. Nothing. If it's inconvenient, I can deliver things next time. Just as I finished recalling that memory, the bathroom door opened. Andrew was wrapped up tightly. Not a single abdominal muscle left for me to glimpse. I teased him. Wow, you're really practicing proper male virtue. He seemed not to hear me at all. He walked straight through my body and began searching around the living room. Holly? I floated there, watching his face grow paler and paler. Completely stunned, Andrew seemed to be unable to see me anymore. Chapter 9. Even when Andrew had flown into that furious rage at Samuel's place, it hadn't frightened me as much as he did now. He looked completely lost, like a madman, searching every room for me. His lips were deathly pale, and the only sound he could make was my name. Holly. Holly. I circled around him, but it was useless. In the end, it seemed he thought of something. He rushed into the bathroom, hands trembling as he put the red string back onto his wrist, then slowly closed his eyes, like a criminal awaiting judgment. I drifted in front of him and saw his lips pressed tightly together, his long lashes trembling slightly. Andrew, you even have wrinkles at the corners of your eyes now, I murmured softly. The moment the words left my mouth, his eyes snapped open. He stared at me without moving an inch. I could even see the red veins in his eyes. Holly, he didn't dare blink, his breathing shallow, yet he still forced a smile onto his lips. I reached out and touched his forehead, smiling at him. I'm here, even if you can't see me. I'm still here. He met my gaze and blinked cautiously, the tips of his ears quietly flushing red where I couldn't see. To lighten the mood again, I did a somersault in midair. If necessary, I could even pull off a 4A twisting flip. Andrew, who had been holding a straight face, instantly cracked. He rubbed his forehead helplessly. Holly, you really are. I naturally finished the sentence. Multi-talented, right? No need to envy me too much. Andrew fell silent. I think that whether you're alive or dead, mindset matters. You have to remember that fortune and misfortune depend on each other. For example, after this whole scare, although Andrew was badly startled, we also discovered a major secret. The red string I got from the temple allows people to see me, although our current sample size was only Andrew. After multiple experiments, it was confirmed, as long as he wore this thing, he could see and hear me, which just goes to show, those 5 yuan were not an IQ tax at all. Andrew twitched the corner of his mouth. Is that really the point? I nodded seriously. You could totally write a paper about this. Andrew once again looked at me like I was an idiot. I actually thought that was pretty good. At least it wasn't that longing gaze from before. It didn't make me sad. After discussing things, we decided to find some time to go back to my hometown and visit the temple, to see why I was still lingering in the human world. Until then, Andrew would just have to put up with living with a ghost like me for a while. When this was said, a certain 35-year-old little kid even swallowed nervously, which left me baffled. Even if you didn't let me stay here, I'd have nowhere else to go. So I wasn't asking for your permission, okay? I paused, then deliberately teased him. First time living with a girl? A vein throbbed at Andrew's temple. Shut up, TSK. So not fun to tease. I obediently shut my mouth and watched him wash up, lie down on the bed, turn off the light, and close his eyes. After a while, he turned over. After another while, he turned over again. Then he opened his eyes and snapped irritably. Holly, are you really planning to just stare at me all night? I hovered by the head of the bed and replied gloomily. You won't let me talk. And now you won't let me keep my eyes open either? So ghosts don't get human rights. Huh? He seemed to grind his teeth for a bit before awkwardly saying, Fine, you can talk. In the darkness, I met his glowing eyes. Talk about what? He sighed. Anything. You're idle anyway. I cracked my knuckles. Then I'll tell you the story about that top-tier school tyrant who fell in love with me. Andrew closed his eyes. I felt like he even took a few deep breaths. Fine. So, a very long time ago, in a small county town, there was an elite aristocratic high school. Inside it was a school tyrant famous throughout the campus, handsome enough to shock heaven and make ghosts cry. I told that ridiculous, melodramatic romance story purely because he used to hate it the most. Back then, I'd just discovered romance novels. It was like opening the door to a whole new world. Every day after finishing my homework, I'd bury myself in magazines and stop hanging out with Samuel and Andrew. One day, Andrew got curious and asked what I was reading, so I casually lent him one. The next day, he came looking for me with dark circles under his eyes, cursing non-stop. What kind of book did you lend me? I looked at his panda eyes and struggled not to laugh. A romance novel. He frowned deeply. Why didn't you say so earlier? You didn't ask. He pinched the corner of the magazine and tossed it back to me. I really don't get how you can like this kind of story. Then, as if he thought of something, the tips of his ears turned red enough to drip blood. And there are even indecent descriptions in it. I advise you not to get addicted to this stuff. Or I'll tell Aunt Martinez. I flipped through the pages, automatically ignoring his last sentence. Oh, you mean the top school tyrant fell in love with me? The descriptions are a bit explicit. I've got some tamer ones too. Want to read them? No. He recoiled 2 steps in disgust, looking utterly heartbroken. Holly, how could you fall so low at such a young age? Me? He kept rambling. How could someone be handsome, rich, skip class every day, and still rank first every time? And their first meeting, just bumping into each other like that, given their height difference. How could their lips possibly touch? And later on, high school students, not even adults yet. How could they? I was beyond annoyed. That's why it's fiction, and I like reading it. None of your business. If you're so bored, go play basketball with Samuel. You used to play basketball with Samuel all the time. I had no idea what was wrong with him lately. Always hanging around me instead. Who knew how his brain worked? He suddenly asked. You like that kind of thing? I was busy reading and answered perfunctorily. Of course I do. Tall, rich, handsome, good grades, arrogant, cool, and devoted. He couldn't listen anymore. He slammed the door and stormed off, not forgetting to throw out a final line as he left. Don't worry. I'll go snitch. In the end, all my yellow books were confiscated by Samuel. I was so mad I ignored the 2 of them for 2 whole days. I hereby unilaterally declare that Andrew still being single to this day is definitely because he snitched on me back then. Chapter 10. But in truth, I had been wrong. Andrew was single simply because he wanted to be single. I spent just one morning accompanying him at the hospital and already noticed that at least 3 or 4 young nurses were interested in him. And yet Andrew Brown's eyes were either glued to his computer or fixed on his patients, completely indifferent to the girl's subtle attempts at flirting. When no one else was around, though, he would just stare at me, as if I were a terminally ill patient. Eventually, I couldn't help saying, Dr. Brown, if you keep looking at me like that, it won't be long before you get sent to psychiatry. Only then did Andrew quietly shift his gaze and focus on eating. That's when I started getting restless, because I overheard some whispered gossip. Maybe it was because I was a ghost now, but my hearing had become extremely sharp. I could pick up the tiniest sounds, so I heard several nurses at a nearby table chatting. Is that the Brown doctor from surgery over there? He looks so young. He's really in his 30s? 35. I heard he's been single forever. The department had even tried to set him up with his own daughter, and he still turned her down. So, does he not like women, or does he just not like people? Hey, don't take it that far. Following their train of thought, my gaze toward Andrew inevitably grew a little suggestive. He caught my expression out of the corner of his eye and frowned, warning me in a low voice, whatever you're thinking right now, stop. I was just about to retort when a middle-aged man sat down across from Andrew, smiling kindly. Andrew, who were you talking to just now? Andrew froze for a split second, then forced a natural smile. Oh, director. No one, just thinking about this morning's case. The director nodded approvingly. I know you're always diligent, but people need to learn how to balance work and rest. Like now, it's lunch break. Don't keep thinking about consultations, or you'll burn out sooner or later, especially in our line of work. Andrew pressed a hand to his forehead. Director, just say what you want to say. The director scratched his head, looking a bit embarrassed. Well, I'll be straightforward. Are you free this weekend? Come out for a meal, Ellie wants to see you. Andrew set down his chopsticks, expression calm. Director, I've said this many times already. I really don't have that kind of intention right now. I know, you've told me 800 times, but you know Ellie, stubborn as a mule. How about this? Just meet her once and make things clear, so she can finally give up. All right? Andrew frowned slightly. I could tell his patience was wearing thin, but in the end, he let out a breath and nodded. All right, just this once. I was extremely curious about this legendary Ellie who supposedly wouldn't let Andrew go. Unfortunately, no matter how much I asked, Andrew refused to tell me anything about her. In the end, he even snapped coldly. Shut up. The nurse nearby froze. Dr. Brown. Is something wrong? Andrew's mouth twitched. No, go on. The patient sitting across from him wore an expression that clearly said, does the doctor's attitude mean I'm about to die? When the weekend finally rolled around, I got my wish and met Ellie at last. Hand on my conscience, she was a real beauty, big eyes sparkling as she looked at Andrew. Andrew stiffly endured an entire meal under her affectionate gaze. Afterward, he found a secluded spot and said bluntly, I'm sorry, Miss Lee, I really don't have feelings of that kind for you. Miss Lee looked crestfallen and asked unwillingly, why? Is there something wrong with me? I quietly drifted a little farther away, but my ears were still forced to listen. Andrew pinched the bridge of his nose. No, you're great. It's just that you're going to talk about that person you like again, aren't you? Miss Lee interrupted him. I already asked around. The person you like is from more than 10 years ago. Why can't you let it go? Then why can't Miss Lee let me go? Andrew replied calmly. I don't think we've interacted that much. How is it not much? When I injured my foot, weren't you the one who treated me? Didn't we see each other all the time back then? Miss Lee, I'm a doctor. Treating you was my job. I see dozens of patients every day. Some of them I've known for nearly 10 years. Miss Lee sobbed softly for a moment, then said, then I won't ask you to love me. Just marry me, okay? My dad is the director. If you marry me, your promotions at the hospital will be faster. Andrew finally lost his patience, his tone turning cold. Miss Lee, I hope you won't say things like that again. After several more rounds like this, Andrew's responses grew shorter and colder. In the end, he left Miss Lee standing there with reddened eyes and walked away. I followed behind him, muttering softly, since when did you have someone you like? How come I didn't know? His steps stopped. He turned around and looked at me deeply. It was the first time I'd ever been stared at until my scalp tingled. And then I heard Miss Lee's voice behind us. Dr. Brown, have you changed your mind? Andrew's eye twitched. No. I drifted ahead and spoke the words Miss Lee couldn't say aloud. Man, your name is heartless. The look Andrew gave me at that moment was crystal clear. If he could, he would exorcise me on the spot. Chapter 11. Still, Andrew was already in his 30s, and his tolerance for me was far higher than it used to be. These days, floating around him, I'd been chattering nonstop like a human loudspeaker. He endured it again and again, only rarely telling me to shut up. Most of the time, he listened quietly, occasionally even responding a line or two. The day before yesterday, I complained to him that his interior decor was far too dull. He shot me a sideways glance and said there was no way he was going to decorate it in the pink I liked. That earned him a half-day lecture from me about how bright colors could improve one's mood. Yesterday, I shared some hospital gossip I'd overheard. Apparently, a handsome doctor from the obstetrics department was juggling 2 relationships at once. Andrew scoffed and said that guy wasn't handsome at all, which earned him my disdain for having terrible taste. Today, I excitedly told him I'd seen a puppy-type junior in the hallway, handsome and sweet-looking. He glanced over, frowned, fiddled with his phone for a moment, then said coolly, that guy has syphilis. Me? All right then. Never mind. He opened his mouth as if to say something else, but was interrupted by the next patient entering the room. The newcomer looked to be in his 30s, slightly chubby, wearing glasses, with a somewhat dull expression. He looked oddly familiar. Andrew froze for a moment when he saw him, then said flatly, Luis, right? I thought for a second beside him and clicked my tongue. Hey, isn't that my back row desk mate? After a moment, Luis recognized Andrew too. As soon as he sat down, he said, Andrew, long time no see. Remember me? Holly's back row desk mate. You even punched me once. My ghostly ears instantly perked up. Andrew smoothly changed the subject without missing a beat. Tell me what's wrong with you physically first. Oh, right. Luis snapped back to reality, unwound his scarf, and revealed several red, swollen scratch marks on his neck. I got scratched by a cat a few days ago. Thought it was nothing, but it got kind of serious. The wounds weren't deep, but they were probably infected, slightly suppurating and rather alarming to look at. Andrew examined them for a while without questioning why Luis hadn't gone to the rabies clinic. He printed out a few forms. Go pay first, then head to the debridement room and have the nurse clean the wounds. Luis nodded blankly. As he was leaving, he turned back and asked, "By the way, Andrew, are you and Holly together now?" That moment of silence was as still as the farewell at Cambridge. Andrew's gaze could kill. "If you're that bored with gossip, you'd better hurry up and get those scratches made by a woman. No less, treated." Luis left awkwardly. I hovered in midair, locking eyes with the slightly guilty-looking Andrew. He was the first to look away, calmly facing the next patient as if nothing had happened. I didn't say anything either. I drifted into a corner and contemplated life. Thinking back, a few days after Luis gave me that love letter, it seemed like there had been a bruise at the corner of his mouth. At the time, he'd said he'd fallen accidentally. Looking at it now, was that actually from Andrew punching him? That wouldn't be surprising. After all, when we first met, Andrew had already punched a thug. But all these years, he'd never shown anything like that toward me. I stared absent-mindedly at him while he worked. Winter sunlight streamed through the window, falling across his profile. His softly trembling lashes cast a faint shadow along the bridge of his nose. I didn't know how much time passed. By the time he was getting ready to leave work, he packed up his things and cleared his throat lightly. "How much longer are you planning to stare at me?" His face was a little red, maybe from staying too long in the heated room, or maybe for some other reason. I couldn't quite tell. My thoughts were a bit of a mess. In the end, I just smiled at him lightly. "Just looking." "Don't be so stingy." He looked away, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "Stop looking. Let's go home." As we were leaving, a nurse passing by joked with him, "Dr. Brown, you seem in a pretty good mood lately. Something good going on?" Andrew smiled politely. "Nothing." On the way back, I stayed silent. That seemed to make Andrew uneasy. After parking the car at home, he didn't get out right away. One hand rested on the steering wheel as he closed his eyes briefly. "Holly." I snapped out of it in the passenger seat. "HM? You haven't said anything the whole way." His Adam's apple bobbed as he spoke. He turned his face toward me, lowered his eyes to hide the loneliness in them. "Does the fact that I like you trouble you that much?" He was so direct it caught me off guard. I opened my mouth, but in the end, all I could manage was a dry sentence. "No." I was just a little surprised. After all, before this, I'd always treated him like family. He let out a self-mocking smile. "Surprised? That figures. I never told you." And by the time I finally had enough courage, "You were already with Samuel." My eyes widened slightly. "That early?" He sighed deeply and reached out, rubbing my head through empty air. He was right about one thing: you're unbelievably slow when it comes to feelings. This was a past I'd never known. Andrew's most secret thoughts, buried in his heart for decades. In the end, he didn't dress it up with any sentimental phrasing. He simply summed it up plainly. "I guess I started liking you a little in middle school. Then I liked you more and more. And it's been like that ever since." Once he said it out loud, it was as if a weight had been lifted. Even though his face, ears, and even his neck had all flushed red, the smile at the corner of his mouth was relaxed. But my chest felt heavy. Those beautiful memories, interwoven with fragments of something terrifying and unbearable, kept flashing through my mind. Andrew's past bad behavior finally made sense. Those awkward, prickly words now revealed the feelings hidden beneath them. Even the rift between him and Samuel suddenly had an explanation. "Holly, you really are slow." Unable to hear what's left unsaid, unable to see the twists and turns of someone's heart. As if you'd been living in a vacuum. But that wasn't quite right. The vacuum seemed to start from a certain point in time. Before that, what was I like? What did I experience? I couldn't remember. Why couldn't I remember? "Holly?" Andrew called my name several times, worry seeping into his voice, before I finally snapped back to reality. "What?" He looked at me strangely. "You've been spacing out all afternoon." I pulled myself out of the tangled thoughts and spoke reflexively. "Sorry. Sorry, for the past. And for the present." He pressed his lips together. "You don't need to apologize. You didn't do anything wrong. I just wasn't brave enough. That's why Samuel got there first. If I hadn't been so awkward, so obsessed with saving face, maybe none of what came after would have happened. And you wouldn't have." I shook my head and cut him off. "This isn't your fault, Andrew. The car accident was just an accident. Don't blame yourself for it." He did this. Samuel did this too, turning an accident from years ago into shackles they locked around themselves. I didn't want that at all. I wanted them to look forward, to keep living their own lives, to think of me once in a while and smile. That would be enough. So I had to state a cruel truth to Andrew. Andrew, I'm already dead. That's an unchangeable fact. I've been really happy staying with you these days, but in the end, I'm definitely going to leave. So I truly hope you can move forward. The hand resting on the steering wheel slowly curled into a fist. Move forward? He gave a short, bitter laugh, the corners of his eyes reddening. How am I supposed to move forward? By finding a substitute like Samuel did? Chapter 12. This was the first time he had brought up Samuel and Virginia. The anger in his words was no less intense than on the day we reunited. That's not what I meant, I said, flustered. I just think that. You think I should let you go, right? He cut in coldly, no longer bothering to keep up appearances, laying bare all the filth and ugliness inside. But liking you is my business. And what position are you even in now to tell me to let you go? You stayed by Samuel's side for so many years without a word. And in the end you could even accept him finding a substitute and starting a new life. But with me, your first reaction after learning how I feel is to tell me to let you go. Don't you think that's cruel? It's always been like this. Your smiles were for him. Your tenderness was for him. Your patience was for him. You could cook for him, act spoiled with him, and accept his care without the slightest burden. But with me, you were calculating and cautious, afraid of owing me even the tiniest thing. Even now, the only reason you're by my side is because I showed up myself, because of that string. Otherwise, you'd still be accompanying him. So among the three of us, I've always been the outsider. Holly, do you really have to treat me like this? Then what did I do wrong? I just like you. That's all. I had never seen Andrew this fragile before. His face was cold, but by the end his voice was trembling, with his eyes lowered. He looked like a soaked dog caught in the rain. His harsh words were nothing more than a bluff, like a hedgehog exposing its soft belly while still threatening that it had sharp spines on its back. You could hug it, but you couldn't hug just the softness in front. You had to embrace the sharpness behind it too. I knew I couldn't touch him, but I still drifted closer and carefully wrapped my arms around him. I didn't know how to respond to all his pent-up grievances. I could only say the simplest truth in my heart. Andrew, I just want you to be happy. Whether he let go of me or not didn't matter. I only wanted the people I cared about to live happily. Samuel was like that. Andrew was like that too. Neither was more important than the other. On the scale in my heart, they stood on the same side, never meant to be compared. Andrew fell silent. After a long while, he spoke softly. Holly, your cruelty really is innate. My dullness kicked in again. Huh? Forget it. It's nothing. He sighed, straightened up, and smiled as if nothing had happened. New Year's Day is coming up in a few days. Let's go back and visit Aunt Martinez. After that day, Andrew deliberately avoided that conversation. He never mentioned anything related to it again, afraid he might lose control like he had that day. I went along joking and laughing with him. I just hadn't expected that when we went back to celebrate the new year, we would run straight into Samuel. In previous years, perhaps to avoid Andrew, Samuel never came home for New Year's. Even during Spring Festival, he would only stay a day or two before leaving. This time, though, he had come back and even opened the door for Andrew. The two of them ran into each other head-on, completely unprepared. After not seeing him for 2 or 3 months, Samuel looked thinner, his face tinged with fatigue. I instinctively glanced inside. Virginia wasn't there. Aunt Martinez came out of the kitchen and asked curiously, "Who is it?" Andrew bumped Samuel's shoulder and walked straight in, smiling at Aunt Martinez. "Auntie, I came to see you." "Oh, Andrew's here." "Hey, Samuel's back too." What a coincidence. Aunt Martinez was wearing a padded house jacket and an apron, smiling brightly. "I feel like you two haven't seen each other in ages." Samuel had already walked over and said lightly, "Everyone's just busy with work." I know, you're all busy now." Aunt Martinez kept smiling, looked Andrew over, then rubbed her apron and headed back to the kitchen. "Sit down for now. My braised pork is still simmering." Ah, Aunt Martinez's braised pork was truly legendary. I shot Andrew a look and slipped into the kitchen right behind Aunt Martinez. The kitchen looked the same as ever. Ingredients piled everywhere, meat and vegetables alike. One pot on the stove was simmering braised pork, while a pressure cooker beside it puffed out steam. Aunt Martinez's brows and eyes were gentle, her movements brisk and orderly as she cooked. Smelling the fragrance of rice mixed with the aroma of meat, I almost felt alive again. In the living room, Samuel and Andrew seemed to be arguing again. The noise was a bit loud. Aunt Martinez was focused on cooking and didn't notice. But I did. Reluctantly glancing at the freshly cooked pork, I drifted back to the living room to see what was going on. What I saw instead was Samuel, face deathly pale, staggering back into his room. I looked at Andrew suspiciously. "What did you do?" Andrew grabbed a handful of sunflower seeds and cracked them open, ignoring me. "Bad temper," I muttered, still uneasy. I drifted after Samuel into his room. The furnishings hadn't changed much. The bed, desk, bookshelf, and even the one-piece poster on the wall were all the same. And there was Samuel, a grown man, crouched by the foot of the bed, seemingly searching for something underneath. After a clatter, he pulled out a small dust-covered box filled with various little items. Samuel rummaged through it and finally picked out a dull, grayish-red string. Before I could even react, he immediately put it on his wrist. At that moment, I was floating in front of him, examining what was inside the box. There seemed to be hair clips I'd once thrown away, some casually folded paper cranes, and many other familiar yet indistinct trinkets. Then, above my head, came the voice I knew better than any other. "Holly." Chapter 13. The current situation was this: 1 table, 3 people, and 1 ghost. Only Aunt Martinez was genuinely enjoying the meal. I actually wanted to enjoy it too, but sadly, I was powerless to do so. As for Andrew and Samuel, both of them seemed to be holding back a surge of anger. It was already a miracle they hadn't started fighting. After seeing me in the room, Samuel seemed to lose his soul entirely. He only dared to call my name softly. "Holly," out of habit. I tried to ease the tension and smiled helplessly. "Andrew really still loves tattling on you." "Huh." Samuel didn't seem to hear me at all. He just stared at me, eyes wide open. "Holly." He stood there like that, calling my name over and over again like a madman, tears streaming down his face. It wasn't until Aunt Martinez knocked on the door outside and called him to come eat that he regained a shred of normalcy. When Andrew saw us come out, he glanced at Samuel's wrist and sneered, but said nothing. I really wanted to grab Andrew by the ear and yell at him, asking what exactly he thought he was doing. But now that Samuel could also see and hear me, in order to avoid the two of them clashing, I could only interact one-sidedly with Aunt Martinez. Being a ghost was exhausting. It was hard not to feel like crying. After the meal, Samuel and Andrew seemed to have made an unspoken agreement. They both said they wanted to go out for a walk. Aunt Martinez assumed they were going to catch up and cheerfully agreed, so I was forced to follow behind them as they left the house. Once we were a few meters away from home, the atmosphere between Samuel and Andrew turned cold. Neither of them was willing to speak first. They walked in silence along the small path we had traversed countless times before, until they finally stopped at the gates of our old high school. It was already evening. Most of the students had left after school, with only 2 or 3 just exiting the gate. The school uniforms had been redesigned and looked much nicer than before. "Want to go in and take a look?" Andrew asked softly. Samuel glanced at me walking beside them and replied, "Let's go in." Andrew frowned at him. "Who asked you?" I was speechless. "Let's go in," I said. It's been a long time since we came here. More than 10 years had passed, and the school had changed drastically. The teaching buildings were all equipped with air conditioning now, and the magnolia trees downstairs had grown much taller. But along the path leading to the dormitories, there were still 2 rows of osmanthus trees. They reminded me of the nights I used to walk with Samuel, when autumn air carried that sweet, cloying osmanthus fragrance. The track field had been replaced with a brand new rubber track. A row of spectator seats had also been added beside the basketball court. I remembered how, back then, when Samuel and Andrew played basketball, I could only sit on the empty ground nearby, bored, listening to the girls next to me scream over their fancy footwork. When they were done, I'd take out 2 bottles of water and hand them over, while casually extorting some errand fees. Back then, Samuel and Andrew would sling their arms over each other's shoulders, joking and laughing, not like now, competing on the court as if the other were a lifelong enemy. shooting not at the hoop, but practically at each other's bodies. There was still nothing I could do, so I simply gave up, drifting over to the spectator seats to watch them vent their anger. No matter what, the way they were now could at least be considered lively. As the sun sank and night fell, under the moonlight, both Samuel and Andrew ended up covered in dusty basketball marks. They were drenched in sweat, panting heavily, utterly disheveled. It was so miserable that I burst out laughing. You two are seriously just like elementary school kids. They looked at each other, both unable to hold back a laugh. The next second, realizing how undignified that was, they each shot the other a glare and turned their heads away. In the end, one sat on each side of me, and the three of us watched the stars together. Sensing the mood, I spoke carefully. Do you really have to be this on edge with each other? It makes things really hard for me. You know, the ghost stuck in the middle. That's because someone did something disgusting, Andrew said coldly. Samuel knew he was in the wrong and didn't argue. After a long silence, he turned to look at me, his voice hoarse. Holly, I'm sorry. Virginia and it's over. I figured Samuel must have had a lot he wanted to say, especially after learning that I'd stayed by his side for 10 years. His shattered expression back then had honestly been a little frightening. But in the end, with all those unspoken words, he only dared to say these 2 sentences to me. If I said anything harsher, he might collapse on the spot. But I didn't want to say something like it's okay. I forgive you either. During that period, watching him call my name while holding Virginia, I really had been hurt and helpless. Still, in the end, I looked at Samuel and smiled faintly. It's all in the past. It was all in the past, the 10 silent years I spent by his side, or the months of bickering and chaos with Andrew. All of it had passed, and I was already dead. To be a little more ruthless about it, everything they were experiencing now had already passed for me. Hearing that, Samuel showed no obvious expression, but his eyes, once always gentle, lost every trace of light. Andrew finally spoke heavily from the side. Back then, you promised me you'd take good care of Holly. I was really stupid to believe you. He spoke of a past I hadn't known. It turned out that on that summer night, Andrew had originally planned to drink up the courage and confess to me. Samuel found out, got Andrew drunk, and then rushed ahead to make the first move. Afterward, Andrew confronted Samuel. Samuel only said that he was more suitable for me, and better able to protect me. Thinking of his unreliable parents and his own temperament, Andrew eventually swallowed that bitterness. In the end, Andrew asked me hoarsely, if I'd confessed to you first back then, would things have been different? Before I could answer, he interrupted himself. Forget it. Don't tell me. That question was no different from asking me to choose between him and Samuel. No matter how I answered, it would be cruel to both of them. I glanced at Samuel, who looked utterly dead inside, and said nothing. At last, Andrew stood up, brushed off his clothes, and said flatly, I'll take you to the temple tomorrow. Then he left. For some reason, I suddenly remembered how, in past New Year's celebrations, because Andrew's parents were rarely home, Samuel and I would always drag him out of his house and force him to spend the holiday with us. He was always like this. Just as we finished setting off fireworks, he would find an excuse to leave early, abandoning Samuel and me to a lonely silhouette. Sometimes I'd run over and cling to him, forcing him to stay and finish one last sparkler with me, then grin and say, Happy New Year. What I really wanted to say back then was, why are you always in such a hurry to leave? Why do you always take the first step away? You cared so much about who mattered more between you and Samuel. Yet when it came time for an answer, you were always the first to withdraw. What kind of logic was that? I watched his retreating back inside softly. Then I turned to Samuel and said, Let's go. We're going home. Chapter 14. That night, I didn't go to either of them. I drifted in the passageway between the Brown house and the Martinez house, sorting through my emotions for the entire night. When the new year arrived, I went mountain climbing with them. Well, strictly speaking, they climbed the mountain. I floated up, deliberately drifting ahead of them and provoking. You guys won't do. Just in your 30s and already this week. Samuel hadn't spoken since last night. Hearing this, he only tugged at the corner of his mouth, forcing out a strained smile. Andrew glanced at me speechlessly and didn't respond either. Me, how boring. The temple had been renovated too. Several plum trees had been planted, all blooming beautifully. On the first day of the new year, quite a few people came to the temple to seek good fortune. Andrew and Samuel wove around the crowd, turned down several side paths, and finally found the spot where I'd bought the red strings back then. But the little stall was gone. In its place was a glass display cabinet filled with various Buddhist bead bracelets, clearly priced. No bargaining allowed. Andrew showed the red string on his wrist to a staff member and received this reply: "I'm new here. I've never seen the temple sell this." They asked several monks in the temple and got essentially the same answer, at most with an added line at the end: "Benefactor, would you like to offer some incense?" The Buddha statue had been recast. Now it gleamed with golden light, solemn and sacred. I looked up at it, and without meaning to, felt a faint ache in my heart. The Buddha saves all beings. Perhaps it was time for me to be saved too. Andrew and Samuel both donated some incense money and bowed to the statue. Nearby was an elderly monk with a white beard. Seeing the red strings on their wrists, he remarked, "These days, there are still people wearing this?" Andrew's eyes lit up instantly. Samuel, quick as lightning, donated a large sum of incense money and then pulled the monk aside, saying he wanted to have a chat, probably not expecting a single sentence to bring the temple such good business. The old monk followed Samuel to a secluded side room, half shocked and half delighted, and calmly answered their questions. "I wove those strings myself. The one selling them back then was my young apprentice. But in truth, there's nothing special about them. It was all just to earn incense money. You see." Hearing this, both of them frowned. Then Samuel said, "Pardon the offense," took the red string off his wrist, and put it onto the old monk's wrist. The monk looked completely confused. I shook my head at Andrew. "He probably can't see me." Andrew then shook his head at Samuel. Samuel took the string back again, his brow knitting so tightly it looked like it might knot itself. Still utterly clueless, the monk looked at them and asked, "Young men, what exactly is the matter?" Andrew rubbed the string between his fingers and asked, "Master, back then, didn't you say the string could be used to make wishes?" The monk stroked his beard. "That is what I said. But there is no necessary connection between the wish and the string. So-called sincerity brings miracles. If one is truly sincere, one could even make a wish to a blade of grass." I felt a little dejected. Oh, so the string really was an IQ tax. Samuel and Andrew fell silent, seeing that we couldn't get any real answers. We prepared to leave. Just then, we heard the old monk chanting behind us. "Love brings separation. Hatred brings meeting. Letting go leads westward. None of these are real, only empty flowers before the eyes. A world of illusion." Andrew and Samuel stopped at the same time and turned back to look at him. The old monk merely smiled. "Happy New Year, benefactors." Neither of them spoke. Instead, I smiled at the old monk and said, "Happy New Year, Master." The old monk seemed to smile in my direction, but said nothing more. On the way back, both Samuel and Andrew were in low spirits. When we were almost home, they stopped in unison and looked at me. Andrew spoke first. "Holly, what are you planning to do now?" I didn't quite understand. "What? Aren't we going home?" Samuel rubbed his brow and explained, "We'll be heading back in a couple of days. What we want to know is, when the time comes, which one of us do you plan to follow?" Ah, that. Since we couldn't find a reason, were they just going to let me keep following them like this? Andrew glanced at my expression, clenched his fist, and said in a flat tone, "Don't try to dodge it. You have to choose one." I thought for a moment, then gently shook my head. "I don't want to choose either of you. I want to leave." Both of them froze. Chapter 15. Andrew spoke first, his voice cold. "Don't even think about it." Samuel looked at me, almost pleading. "Holly." I floated as far away from them as I could, until my back brushed against that invisible barrier. Only then did I meet their eyes. "This is a decision I thought through all night," I said, doing my best to stay calm. "I originally hoped we might find some kind of solution today, but it doesn't look like there is one. Still, you both know this as well. I can't stay by your sides like this forever." When I looked up at the Buddha's compassionate gaze earlier, a faint realization had already taken shape in my heart. I felt like I might be close to leaving. I didn't yet know how, but before that happened, I wanted to make everything clear. No matter what happens in the future. I want to say this first. Andrew, Samuel, you are both incredibly important to me. All my good memories are tied to the two of you. I really am slow when it comes to feelings. But whether it's friendship or love, I cherish you both. So I hope you won't cling to me like this anymore, or at the very least, that you'll respect my wishes. I've already lingered here long enough. I'm satisfied. I think it's enough. Back then, my wish was simply that the two of you would be okay. And now, from my own one-sided perspective, the fact that you've made up means you are okay. And I hope that in the future, far, far into the future, you'll both continue to be okay. Sure, I'd love nothing more than a sudden resurrection or some magical rebirth. I added with a small shrug. But novels are novels. Reality is reality. I smiled at them, finally at ease. There's nothing that can be done about that. After all, everything before our eyes is empty. Nothing but illusion. For a long time, neither Samuel nor Andrew spoke. They stood there like statues, motionless and lifeless. In the end, it was Aunt Martinez, returning from grocery shopping, who broke the stalemate. Samuel. Andrew, why are you just standing there? You're right in the draft. Only then did the two of them snap back to their senses. They responded stiffly and followed Aunt Martinez into the house in a daze. She must have noticed the red strings on their wrists, because she casually started a conversation. You just came back from the temple, didn't you? You're still wearing the red strings Holly bought back then. What a coincidence, when I was tidying up a few days ago, I found one just like it in Holly's room. It must have been hers. Samuel froze. Mom, is that string still there? It is. I'll go get it for you. Sensing something off about their expressions, Aunt Martinez hurried to my room. The room hadn't changed much. Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor Sakura posters were still on the walls. The furniture hadn't even gathered much dust. She must have cleaned it often. She went to a box in the corner filled with my things, rummaged through it, and pulled out the red string. The instant I saw it, I wanted to burn it. The thought came suddenly, instinctively, like a revelation, as if the destination of my 10 years wandering the human world had always been this moment. I floated back with Aunt Martinez and told Andrew and Samuel what I was thinking, but they only stared at the red string in her hand, saying nothing, acting as though they couldn't see me or hear me at all. They were doing it on purpose. It wasn't until Aunt Martinez spoke again that the silence broke. Come to think of it, it's been almost 10 years since Holly left, hasn't it? Back then, I promised her parents I'd take good care of her. In the end, I still didn't do well enough. Samuel's face grew even more desolate. Andrew, however, seemed to catch on to something and frowned. Auntie, I've never asked, what exactly happened to Holly's family back then? Samuel's expression shifted several times. He exchanged a look with Aunt Martinez, then, as if by accident, glanced in my direction before letting out a quiet sigh. Mom, go ahead. Aunt Martinez sighed deeply too, her eyes reddening. This was something we were asked to keep confidential back then, so I never spoke of it. After all these years, it's probably time Andrew knew. Holly's father had a very special job. I never knew exactly what he did, everything was highly classified. Back then, he was on a mission when something went wrong. He never came back. After that, Holly and her mother were retaliated against. Mei Ying risked her life to protect Holly. At that time, Holly was covered in blood. She was completely terrified. After Mei Ying passed, Holly regained a bit of awareness, but most of her earlier memories were gone. The doctors said it was a self-protective response. The best solution was to change her environment and let her start over. As she spoke, Aunt Martinez wiped her tears and gently patted Samuel's head. I owe Samuel an apology too. I kept insisting that you protect Holly well, and when that accident happened later, you've never been able to forgive yourself. I couldn't really hear the rest. Scenes flashed through my mind, my elusive father, my mother who always smiled at me with endless gentleness, and that night thick with the stench of blood. I really was covered in blood, but it wasn't mine. It was my mother's. She held me tightly, soothing me over and over. Holly, don't be afraid. Then she clenched her teeth, hardened her heart, and locked me inside the wardrobe. In the darkness, all I could hear were faint, chaotic sounds from outside, and the barking of a neighbor's dog. Everything came back. All of it, and I felt my body growing more and more transparent. In the end, Both Andrew and Samuel looked up at me, stunned. I smiled at them. Burn my red string, I said. Epilogue. After death, one really does go to the underworld. Looking at the long queue stretching across the Naiha Bridge, I could only sigh. I had begged Andrew and Samuel for 2 or 3 days before they finally, with great reluctance, burned my red string. They were heartbroken, but I thought, there really was no other way. Everything would pass eventually. Just then, someone tapped me from behind, and a voice I knew all too well sounded beside my ear. Miss, you dropped something. A hand reached out, a red string resting in the palm. I looked up blankly and met Andrew's smiling eyes. This time, he said, smiling, I got there first. Hey, don't cry. He fumbled awkwardly, trying to wipe away my tears, but I was too angry to pay him any attention, dodging his hand again and again. After a while, he finally sighed helplessly. Don't think of me like that. I had a lot of surgeries these past few days. I died suddenly. He gazed at me with undisguised longing and mimicked my tone. Just like you said, there's nothing that can be done about it. I grabbed the hand holding the red string, laughing at him through my tears. You don't sound anything like me. He tightened his grip around my hand, lowered his eyes, and smiled softly. Then I'll have to trouble you, next lifetime, to teach me properly.